next up, we have Lobi, who is coming and delivering another one of our keynotes today. So I'm going to invite Lobi up to join me on stage. And then following this, we have one more talk from a winner from Surreal World Assets 1, Patrick, who will be joining to help us finish out the opening ceremony today. Lobi, I have sent you an invite. If you don't see it, can you flag in chat? Hopefully you're not too busy ordering. Can't see it. What's going on? Could you, I'm going to send it again, but if you still can't see it, can you refresh and rejoin? Maybe you got distracted ordering some pizza and, oh, another Lobi is joined. I'm going to invite the second Lobi. Getting ready. Amazing. So coming to join me up on stage now.
Hey, can you hear me?
Hey, yeah, we can hear you well.
Awesome. Let me try and share my screen. Okay, can you see that?
Yes, we can see the infinite loop. Now we can see your slides.
Okay, awesome. Thank God for that. Okay, sweet. Thank you so much.
We can see the Firefox pop up in the corner that has like the screen share. We can close that. If you on your toolbar, yeah, there we go. Nice.
Ooh. Okay, that should be better, right?
Yeah, that's good.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. Sweet. Hey everyone. Today I'm talking about Avant Gay NFTs. That's Hideous Man is the response from Solana Cole Anson after seeing an NFT called Little Swag World, which you can see on the left of the screen there. Little Swag World is one of the key collections in the canon of this small art movement known as Avant NFTs or Gay NFTs or Avant/Gay NFTs, which is, yeah, what I'm talking about today. I'm Lobi. I've been involved in the scene for like a year or two now. I do weekly interviews on Spaces with artists in the scene through my show World Receiver. World Receiver is hosted via vvv.so, which is a Solana minting platform built by people in the scene. It's really impressive, very customizable, and a super exciting thing that's happened within the last few months, basically. I also do more general talk show with Verse.works, who are like an ETH platform. And I also do writing for the platform Exchange.art, who are on Solana, and they also have Ethereum functionality. But yeah, a lot of art-based work, basically. And I wanted to start off with this tweet because I find it very funny that hideous is the first word he uses to describe this piece, when in reality, I think LSW, Little Swag World, is one of the far more accessible collections within the Avant Gay scene. As you can see on the right, it has this, it's a much cleaner, nicer aesthetic than the stuff you're going to see later. So what is the scene? It's been under intense analysis and scrutiny over the past few months. As a lot of liquidity and fresh eyes have flowed towards it, there's been a lot of new collectors and artists finding themselves entangled in this movement. There's a lot of, there's sort of consensus that recognizes how hard it is to document the scene due to the limits of digital archiving, in that half of the lore and the origins of the scene are kind of shrouded in mystery due to it all happening in disparate X group chats. The knowledge is literally passed on through tweets and timeline beefs, and it's all very unorganized, and it wasn't really being archived in any easily accessible way. And that's kind of where I positioned myself through my writing spaces, doing these in an attempt at preserving some knowledge around this movement that I believe is actually very important, and seeing myself as a sort of archivist instead of an art critic or even really an art writer. Garden Putty, a key member and collector in the scene, described the problem with archiving this scene pretty well in his recent article, which is called Notes from the Avant NFT Underground, where he says, "To know this world is to live on the timeline, to be in more Twitter group chats than you care to, and to understand the history and personal conflicts that make the scene as much for a pro wrestling style soap opera as it is a new branch of contemporary art." From my understanding, the idea of Avant NFT as a name and movement stems from an early piece of writing on the Remilia blog site. Remilia being the makers of Milady Maker, as well as a bunch of other IP. Yeah, it was used to describe Remilia as a collective as an Avant NFT collective DAO. This was compounded by this meme, which was by Bosch, who created Little Swag World, the collection I opened with, and he used it in this meme about Avant NFTs. It featured a bunch of early collections that were sort of foundational to the later movement. You see the bottom left, Bonklers, which were also Remilia IP, as well as Jabberforms, which is like early GAN works, and a lot of Bosch's work was early GAN work, as I'll get into later. But yeah, the use of Avant wasn't really a term that was loved or co-opted by a lot of people who ended up as key figures in the scene. Jared Madare, who runs a gallery in New York City called Yechi Lang, which showcases a lot of the artists in this scene's physical work. And he also runs VVV, where I host World Receiver, and where a lot of the work that's coming out of the scene is now being minted on Solana. He told me that while Remilia used it sincerely, one of the artists in the scene, Spiky DJ, they're sort of collective, as well as Jared himself, used it in a more ironic way. This was cemented after an interview with Jared where he said the circuit we're part of jokingly refers to itself as Avant NFT, but the interviewers cut out the jokingly part, which is some classic journalism. And then the final part of the name history is regarding where the gay part came from. There's been a lot of talk around sort of the origin of where all this naming convention came from and the sort of roots of it. And it kind of comes back to what Daniel was saying earlier about him wanting to coin optimism. People like to have that sort of claim. And the gay naming convention is the only one that has like a sort of solid thing we can point to. So it's related to our ironic use of Avant that was just mentioned, and it became a thing because of the series of tweets between Tajiba Brand Manager, one of my favorite artists in the scene, and New Art Program. Yeah, calling things Avant has always been pretty gay, not gonna lie. Well, we can't call it gay NFT. We could. That we could was all it took for the gay NFT naming to become canon. It serves different purpose to different people. Matter of Material Work said in a tweet that the Solana Underground identifying as gay is a great filter to alienate both the fragile homophobic bros terrified of being seen as gay and the purity police. For me, I think it's mainly just really funny, especially given the thread that started being so ridiculous and how quickly a small 3-tweet exchange can come to help define an art movement. It's proof of like this really intense mimetic force that kind of runs through all of the works in this scene, and I guess crypto in general. So moving on from the name origins, what does the actual art look like? I've shown the Swag World, and I'll go into it a bit more here. Bosch, the artist behind this, made them with GANs, generative adversarial networks, an early form of AI. And rather than giving into the strange aesthetics often like seen in early AI works, and you can see it in his collection on the left here, Super Metal Mons 1s and 2. Super Metal Mons sort of designed and trained on a bunch of like minifigures. They always remind me of Crazy Bones Go-Go's, and I love them for that because that was like the biggest thing I collected as a kid. These are obviously super strange and uncanny, and they kind of fit in that sort of early AI canon of weird and gross, but also kind of cute in a strange way. These ones are, yeah, they have scary cute sort of aspect to them. The one on the bottom left is called Omom, and I think he's like one of my favorites. But yeah, I see LSW, Little Swag World, as sort of moving past that. It's moving past this uncanny use of AI and actually really succeeding at making something quite beautiful and interesting outside of just playing on the uncanny. It's not leaning into that. Little Swag World is informed by a lot of influences that are super common to many of the works in the avant gay scene, sort of like pop culture meets internet culture and aesthetics. This idea of toys as avatars, with LSW specifically looking like a combination of a sort of hype beast Funko Pop and the collectible figurine aesthetic. The plastic whenever feeling cheap. The fits are insane and like designed and styled off of like video games and a lot of actual fashion. And they have their small characters. The Mons on the left actually translate over to the right and are used as little sidekicks in LSW. And there's also like a lot of important art historical paintings as traits and background framing, and you'll see that a lot throughout a lot of the collections. But here you have Francis Bacon piece used as background to this LSW piece. And I said that earlier, LSW is a more accessible collection. And I believe this is partly because its influences are definitely there, but they exist in an idea of a whole figurine. And this is lost in a lot of the later collections, where the image becomes a dumping ground for an immense amount of information in an aesthetic coined trait maxing. Many artists in the scene are using a program called Hashlips, a sort of auto collage software that can put together a multitude of single images known as traits and compile them into a whole image. This use of traits has lended itself to an exasperating amount of remixing. This diagram shows 5 different collections and how they all employ the same trait. And this sort of hyper-citational practice is key to understanding the scene and its constant references to itself. And I think it's really interesting to be having this conversation during like an IP buildathon, because a lot of the way we work is complete democratization of the assets. Like we are constantly just giving our assets away to one another for anyone to use, basically. And they have been remixed countless times, you can see here, throughout different collections by a bunch of different artists. One of the key collections is Mythella, which you can see on the far left, and was the earliest of these. You can see this was actually made by Son of Lasgo and X, so thank you to him for using this, for making this. You can see the sort of order of influence at the top of when images were minted. But yeah, one of the key ones from Mythella is a collection about Milady, the ETH collection by Remilia Corp, you see on the right. Mythella exists as a kind of black sheep brother, far more nihilistic or realistic, I guess, in its attitude towards the Solana trenches and sort of meme coins, and actually how brutal and it's just gambling. And this is in complete contrast to the overly optimistic white-pilled Milady, which is all about love, supposedly. And this idea was then spun again for the second collection, Mythella 2, which actually isn't shown here. Mythella 2 was a collection about Mythella, and it pooled traits from these 10 different artists all together. So all these 10 different artists were throwing their own images over and over again into, yeah, and it just made these insane maximalist pieces that, yeah, they're like some of the most maximalist works in the canon. And the remixing doesn't end there. Drafella, which you can see as the second collection, and Drafella 2. Drafella is a collection about Mythella, with Drafella being a collection that is forged from the remnants of a fallen Dratini and the essence of Mythella's soul, which is something it says in the description of the collection on Ethereum. And then we have at the end Drillady, which is like a Lola. You can't see it too clearly here, but it's like a sexy Lola bunny as as the sort of outline. And I guess it's a sexy Lola bunny that is forged with the essence of Drafela's soul, to keep in that sort of line of thinking. It's really weird art. There's no denying it. And the rabbit hole gets weirder, and 15 minutes is not really enough at all to go through all the lore, and I'm barely scratching the surface. Luckily, there's plenty of writing popping up recently regarding all of it. I do some over on Twitter. I'm at ArchivePilled, and you can find them on my highlights tab. But really, I think the best overview we have right now is a very recent piece that I mentioned earlier, the Garden Party piece, which was published via Right Click Save, and it's called Notes from the Avant NFT Underground. And if you're interested in kind of finding out the full history, it's worth going there. Yeah, it's a really interesting time to be kind of interested in it all. But all this leads me to, why is this work important? So I promise it does sort of come back to building art, building on blockchains. So no one has to like the same art as me, but I'm absolutely going to argue for why I think the work I like is worth liking. And when it comes to Avant Gay NFTs, there is something so fresh about it. It's like a genuine new movement, something that, of course, like all movements, feels from the past, but it is capturing something new. Many people have like tried to attempt to pie these works off as extensions of other movements, especially like Dadaism. And there's like a big conversation at the moment about how like abstract expressionism is coming back, and I think people are just trying to understand like new movements through the old, which I get, but it's not it's not doing what Dada is doing, as we can see. This is what people are kind of saying about it on the left. And we've seen like trait maxing, that sort of maximalist aesthetic, talked about as schizo collage, which is something I don't really like, because people then just seem to read it as just another form of collage. And the whole schizo thing also reminds me of the sort of degenerate trader and the schizo personality stuff that is like rife in the Solana trenches outside of the art scene, and doesn't really interest me. But to me, the more interesting way of looking at all this is in how Jared Nader talks about Jafela as the most exciting painting conversation in the last 20 years, definitely in the last 15. But it's still more than digital painting. Where we had the post-internet generation of artists, people like John Rathman, Petra Courtwright, Oliver Larrick, Amalia Ullman, Daniel Keller, who was speaking earlier, and Parker Ito, who made the Lady collection I showed above. And all those artists I just named have like worked adjacent to our sort of scene, whether, or at least are involved in crypto now, which I also find very interesting. Where these artists were, and I'll read a quote from Eva Folks to explain it. They were working in a way that, quote, references one so deeply embedded in and propelled by the internet that the notion of a world or culture without it or outside it becomes increasingly unimaginable or impossible. The Avant Gay scene kind of moves on from this. It's not about reference. Where their work was about the internet, our work, I believe, is the internet. When I look at many of these collections, I truly feel as if a computer, if given the autonomy and personality and upbringing of the artists, would be outputting the same work, you know. Like, as Parker says on the left here, gay NFT is the first mimetic art in context, in form, and in dissemination. It's the first art that's truly internet, and the below works aren't comparable. And I made a tweet a few months back saying, we are no longer making art about the internet. We are conduits for the internet to make art itself. If the computer had hands, it would have made Jafela, it would have made the Toji works in honor of its ancestors. Oh, I just realized I got the wrong image though. It would have made Squishy Drifters when it got its license, and it would have made Little Swag World for its toys. As the buildathon commences, I think it's important to think about an idea that heavily relates to this NFT scene, the idea of giving tools to the internet, imagining what a sort of self-actualized internet looks like. It isn't about monopoly algorithms and monopoly platforms. It's about creating a way for individualism to shine while still building collectives. One of the beautiful things about early internet is how customizable it was, and a lot of what's happening in the scene kind of reminds me of stuff like of that early internet feeling you got. There's that recent trope that's been passed around in the past few years, but I quite like it. It's the idea that the internet used to be a place you visited rather than the place you're always within. Some people want to be completely in it. I don't know if I do. I like it being a place that I can go to. And Avant Gay NFTs are a sort of reminder of this. I love going to my wallet and spending time looking at the ones I own from a specific collection and getting lost in them. They're like hypertext novels. And if you go down like where all the traits came from, you'd be studying them for a very long time. And I get so much joy from this exploration, the same way I got it from going through Tumblr blogs and clicking through GeoCities sites and finding all these uniquely made, quirky places on the internet. But they also, as artwork, symbolize the internet now surrounds us, how hard it is to escape it. Like this ceaseless content literally feeds into all the art. The art is made out of this ceaseless content. All these traits are just taken from the timeline, and that's where like it's all actually very anti-IP. It's really bad in this context. It's all pretty much stolen. But my question is, how can we make it feel like we're getting lost in a creative way again? That's how I felt when I first came to the scene. I felt like, oh my God, I felt very excited about the prospect and the way my friends are working in the scene and the new stuff that keeps dropping daily. I'm like, finally, there's something actually creative and exciting happening here. And I'm interested in how the scene has built a way for this creative freedom and autonomy by using crypto as a way of helping fund projects, as well as using AI and vibe coding as a way of like expanding your creative practice. I have sites that I would never have been able to make because I'm not a coder without Claude and vibe coding. And that's really exciting, being able to do that for my artwork. So yeah, I'm excited to see what people build in that sort of space. And I want to use the internet to improve my art. to have total control of what I'm creating, and I want to be able to have fun online. Feel like I'm visiting spaces and feel like I have control over what I'm consuming. I want to feel inspired to make my own home on the internet and to know that I have the tools to do this and sustain this space like it's my own garden. That's all from me. Thank you so much, Nick, for inviting me here and share all the story, people, and thank you, Rebecca, for everything you've been doing. It's been a really cool event. So yeah, really appreciate you guys having me on to talk about this.